right, ladies and gentlemen, hey, very special guest on today's episode, PFN Daily. Look, the Brian Flores lawsuit is sending ripple effects all across the National Football League. And of course, everybody wants answers. They want clarity. So I'm bringing on Daniel Lust. He's a sports attorney who's been appearing on ESPN, Fox Sports, CBS Sports, not to mention he's also a sports law professor at New York Law School. And he's also the host of the Conduct Detrimental Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, a fantastic listen if you want to know about the legal workings around all sports, not just football, every sport as well, and everything it entails. Dan, great to see you again, my friend. I know it's been a while, but glad to have you on today's show. And man, this is a wild bombshell that came out of left field yesterday for the NFL.
Certainly a bombshell, and your Denver Broncos caught a stray, as they say. Certainly got pulled into this. But yeah, at times like this, right? I mean, it's certainly it's an important lawsuit. Sometimes it's going to force us to have these uncomfortable conversations, but they're good. I guess for our sports fans, I want to at least help today with you, Cody, kind of separate the noise from the actual portions of the lawsuit. Certain things are being brought up that really have no relevance to the case, important sports issues, but not really important to winning and losing in the court of law.
I think this is the important thing to discern here, which is fantastic. Now, one thing I want to pinpoint, Flores has a 58-page class action lawsuit that entails allegations of racial discrimination against the NFL, New York Giants, and other teams like the Denver Broncos and the Miami Dolphins as listed in here. And, the overall process here, right? I think when we look at it from the lens of just this news happening, I think many people are wondering, how do we separate the noise from what is actually real here? So obviously, I think that's a great segue into what you actually brought up. You set it up perfectly for me.
It's almost like I host my own show, Cody. No, I'm just messing with you. So I guess here were the two that I wanted people to pay attention to. The biggest bombshell, I think, in all of this is Stephen Ross, the owner of the Dolphins, allegedly bribing the head coach of the team $100,000 per game that he lost. So why would one do that? To get a better draft pick, right? And if people remember, I know you do, I'm sure, Cody, that was the hashtag tank for Tua. But apparently that movement wasn't just occurring on social media. It was occurring in the front office. So that's very big. It's a big allegation. We'll see if there's any truth to it. But with respect to a lawsuit that talks about racial discrimination, hiring practices at the head coach level, the general manager level, I don't know, if you show me a check that shows $100,000 was offered to Brian Flores, doesn't prove racial discrimination. So it's an important kind of case, right? Stephen Ross could certainly lose his team if this is proven. It's a very big allegation, but we got to separate these two. You have the Stephen Ross stuff over here, and you have the racial discrimination stuff over here. They're very separate things. So I guess I can, people want to talk about the Belichick text, but I think that's the big thing that people are missing. Like maybe it's a smoking gun, but it has nothing to do with the lawsuit.
And that's the one thing, too, I was actually going to bring up. I actually had that listed in my question because I saw one of your tweets go out last night. Going back to the whole Stephen Ross thing, the allegations of paying him $100K per loss. Flores' representation states that there's corroborating evidence that is there that supports his allegation. What type of evidence in a situation like that would be needed? Because the listing right there and the language suggests that he met with him on his private yacht. Don't think that there was anything in writing. How do you prove somebody's word? Right here, I feel like for Flores, it's trying to get to the court of public opinion beforehand. But obviously, in a situation like this, what type of evidence do you really need to help support that allegation?
Right. I mean, there's direct evidence, and then we'll say indirect, but you guys might know it from the law and order world. There's like circumstantial evidence. If there's an email, right, or a text message, or a voice note, or something, right, that says, "Hey, Brian, I'll give you $100,000 if you lose this week 2 game." That's pretty direct. You could have lesser evidence, maybe less important evidence, but we'll call it indirect or circumstantial evidence. Like, hey, after a phone call between the two of them, or an in-face meeting between Flores and Ross, that Flores, spoke to his wife. Hey, isn't this the craziest thing? The owner is offering me X, right? So you could have somebody come in as an indirect who's hearing it, as we call a fancy legal term, hearsay, who's hearing it secondhand. So you could certainly have evidence. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily strong evidence. And Cody, I'll go one step further. This complaint was designed, and I'll just tell you, I read complaints for a living. This complaint was written to have a lot of newsworthiness to it. You don't normally start the complaint with a quote from someone. You don't have a Martin Luther King quote as the second sentence in the whole complaint. Normally there's a preamble, there's some nonsense form stuff you have to do, but they went right to the heart of it. I mean that to say they put the Bill Belichick text message directly in the complaint. If they had receipts, real receipts from Stephen Ross, trust me, those would be in the complaint. That's just my take on it. I don't know one way or the other, but that's the way this complaint's written. They went on a scale of, being a little non-discreet to kind of being all the way out there. They went to a 10, and that just tells me that I think they would have put it out there if they had it. That's just me, though.
Well, in regards to the Bill Belichick text messages as well, I mean, obviously interpretation, we know that the NFL and many teams conducting interviews for head coaching jobs, they need to interview minority candidates. And now the Rooney Rule has also been very controversial because, as Brian Flores is indicating, it means that some teams presumably use it to check a box, which I think is very unfair. And we've talked about it here on the show. There are so many minority candidates out there that are very qualified to be head coaches for NFL organizations, but it's unfortunate that right now we only have one minority candidate as a head coach right now, and that is Mike Tomlin, who's been doing a fantastic job over in Pittsburgh. Now, with the Bill Belichick text message there, obviously it indicates that he was hearing that the initial confusion was that Brian Flores, he heard that Brian Flores was maybe going to be the guy, but Bill Belichick texted the wrong person, and it was actually trying to text Brian Daboll, that they heard that it was going to be him. Now, I think when you look at this situation, you mentioned the smoking gun theory. How does this maybe hold up in a sense for it kind of proving that maybe the New York Giants, did it to accommodate the Rooney Rule? Because this happened, they already had the belief that Daboll was the guy before Flores interviewed. So how does that process maybe play out in the court of public opinion?
Put it this way. I think the ideal scenario for someone in Brian Flores' situation would have, and let's say, and we also should mention, it's a class action lawsuit. So as much as we're talking about Flores' case here, we're going to also have to talk about the Jim Caldwells of the world and the people that came before him. That's what a class action lawsuit is. It brings together, just like we were in school, a class of people. Could be hundreds of people. It certainly could be a lot that have similar claims. That's black head coaches, black general managers, and black individuals that applied for those positions in the NFL. So that could be tens, if not hundreds of people, honestly. So keep in mind, I mean, the ideal scenario for this particular claim, right, is if you found someone in terms of checking a box who was, let's say, a defensive assistant, and they had no head coaching experience at any level, way, shape, or form, and they were scheduled for an interview. And I don't know, on paper, that person maybe doesn't deserve to have a head coaching job. And, you just check the box. You took two special teams coordinators that had no head coaching experience. They're both in their early 30s. That's probably the extreme of checking a box. For Flores' standpoint, he was one of the hottest head coaching targets out there, right? And he had a lot of success with the Patriots, a lot of success with the Dolphins. So if you're the Giants, I think you could plausibly argue, checking a box, this guy was on paper one, if not our lead candidate here. So when it comes to Bill Belichick, and this is what, again, one of the main points that I'm trying to go on the media tour and explain, Bill Belichick maybe knows a lot about football. Maybe he's really locked in. People get reports wrong all the time, right?
Yeah.
Bill Belichick is not an employee of the New York Giants. He's not an agent of the New York Giants. He does not speak for the New York Giants. He cannot bind the New York Giants to statement in a court of law. Maybe John Mara can, the owner of the team, right? Certainly that's the person whose statements can bind the team. But Bill Belichick cannot. So what the Giants statement responded and almost was responding to Belichick was saying all the way up until the 11th hour, not predetermined, up until the 11th hour, this decision was still involving Brian Flores. And I mean, Brian Flores has had incredible success in the NFL. So, of course, everyone believes that. So, Flores has the burden of proof. He has to show that the Giants are full of it, and this was for some type of discriminatory purpose, or that they were really just checking a box. And Flores had no chance whatsoever at the head coaching job. And here's the problem, Cody, and I know I'm giving you a lot here. It's going to be hard in this particular case, right? Because Brian Daboll, the guy who got the job, is not someone that's unqualified. I can make the argument on paper that Brian Daboll was the hottest head coaching candidate after performances against the New England Patriots and against the Kansas City Chiefs. So there's a lot weighing against Flores. He's going to have to show that he had no chance whatsoever to get this job. And I just, on paper, I'm having a hard time seeing it. So maybe the cavalry will come, right? He's going to have, the Jim Caldwells of the world who have, I think, stronger cases. But just with Flores, I think people are rightfully poking holes in this one.
Well, and something else you mentioned too, the Denver Broncos being listed in 2019. Flores had an interview with the team for the vacant head coaching job at their previously fired Vance Joseph. We know Vic Fangio ultimately got the job, but Flores claimed that the Broncos management brass of John Elway, Joe Ellis, they showed up an hour late to the interview and they appeared disheveled, obviously with the assumption of drinking the night before. Well, the Broncos have come out and they've issued a statement saying that they are going to defend the integrity, obviously, of the organization and their employees, and that there was an extensive documented interview process and that the interview actually started on time. If facts like this come out and they provide evidence that shows that the interview started on time, it was extensive and it was thorough, does that throw anything else out of this case that Brian Flores is trying to make?
Two things. This is why people are reading into the Stephen Ross claims, because it's said under sworn testimony. It's a sworn document, right? Not testimony, but a sworn legal document. You have to say it under penalty of perjury or penalty of Rule 11 sanctions for the lawyers. We go to the Broncos, right? They claim, mean, maybe you want to call it an opinion, but it looked to me like it was factual, that it appeared that, Elway and co were, had a night of drinking before. It was almost borderline in a defamatory sense. I mean, that was, again, written in a sense that if that's not true and the receipts bear that out, that was inaccurate, there could be some penalties for the lawyers involved, and maybe even Flores, right? I don't know what the source of that information was other than Flores. So, I mean, with respect to that, even let's say that's true, right? Let's say that Elway showed up drunk, which, I mean, I have no idea one way or the other. Does that mean that Flores was a sham interview, that they were just checking a box? Not necessarily, right? You could have someone being unprofessional, but doesn't necessarily mean that they were, just checking a box. Again, Flores was a very desirable coaching candidate, got the Dolphins job, right? Dolphins is a major media market and was the front runner for a number of jobs. And I think probably would have landed one of these remaining head coaching vacancies had this lawsuit not happened. Not saying that he should or shouldn't have filed it. I just, optics wise, when you come for the king, right? Colin Kaepernick went after the NFL, has never played another down in the NFL. Curt Flood, who's very famous in our sports law textbooks, sued Major League Baseball to help create modern day free agency. Mission accomplished. Curt Flood was never heard from again. So I don't see the wisdom from if you really do want to coach in the National Football League, I don't see the wisdom of suing the Broncos, suing the Dolphins, suing the Giants, suing the National Football League while you're in the middle of interviews. And then having, right, someone's now calling in to question your credibility, right, with the Broncos now saying we kept the receipt. So it just doesn't send the message on a couple levels. To me, I mean, I don't know if he really, Brian Flores truly does want to coach again in the NFL, or if his lawyers are just not advising him properly, because I would not be taking this route, this adversarial approach while you're in the middle of interviewing. Just get, if I'm his lawyer, maybe wait a week or two, maybe you get the Texans gig, and then this lawsuit certainly has tremendously more teeth to it. So yeah, I'm having trouble making sense of that.
I mean, yeah, obviously it's a lot, and this came out of left field, obviously, yesterday. The final question I have for you here today, Dan, is in regards to the Stephen Ross $100K per loss suit once again. I think the bigger question, too, for Ross, you mentioned the potential loss being forced to sell the team if he was, in fact, found guilty of this and found of conducting himself in this manner here. But obviously, as the NFL gets into the world of gambling and betting, I mean, outside of just Stephen Ross maybe being forced to sell the team, if this comes to light here, what other potential ripple effects could it have on the team, and maybe some, significant ramifications when it comes to draft picks or something along those lines? Is there anything that you might think could come on the horizon?
I mean, the obvious one, right? You're questioning the integrity of the NFL. Draft pick compensation, certainly potentially worse if you were losing games on purpose to get a better draft position. I don't think that allegation is made lightly. We'll see what the evidence is to back that up. I don't know what it necessarily could be. But yeah, I mean, it potentially, even some investigations from the federal authorities, if you're really influencing the results of games with a bribe, $100,000 bribe. I haven't seen anything one way or the other if this money was accepted, or what extent, if was it said in jest as a joke. There's certainly some shades of like, hey, maybe this wasn't as bad as it sounds, but there's some shades of truth to it. But yeah, the NFL, I mean, I guess I'll say this, Cody. I have a problem with the NFL statement that they say this thing, was without merit, right? That's how they finish their statement. I'm not sure how you know that everything is without merit within an hour and a half of the complaint being filed. I would hope that they would launch a full and unfettered investigation into these claims, because these are very serious. And who knows what the truth is out there, but the NFL's got to look into it. You can't just swipe it away with these are without merit, and we looked into it for half an hour and have a good day. I mean, that's not going to cut it.
This will be a significant case study, I imagine, in the future for anybody who wants to practice sports law. And Dan is one of the best in the business, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to sports law, being in the know about the different ramifications for every sport and how the law kind of ties everything together. Obviously, he's the host of the Conduct Detrimental Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, be sure to go check that out today. It's free and available everywhere you get your podcast. He does a fantastic job. You can follow him on Twitter @SportsLawLust. Dan, great seeing you as always, my man. And obviously, we're waiting to see what happens. And if something else big breaks, we'll be looking forward to having you on here again.
My pleasure, Cody. Anytime.